What we want to do is talk to our images, and when you roll over one with your mouse, have the images swap out from black and white to color. And when you click on one, we want to go to the detail page. So let me start here by saying we want to make sure everything is running. So put in just a little debug code. Move my mouse so you can see that. And I always like to make sure everything is linked by putting something in console.log almost immediately. I can take this out later, but I'll say start successfully, and that's pretty cool. So if I run this, then I'll get a console.log message that tells me my files are linked properly. One thing the book encourages you to do, and I would concur, is to force JavaScript to wait until the document is loaded. Their way of doing it is window.onload. We'll explain a little bit more about this next week on what exactly is going on. For right now, when onload is a method, is a property for window, it's waiting until all the HTML is loaded. All of it, all the images, everything. So we'll call init all when the window is loaded. One of the things I know I'm going to have to do is create a variable called myDog to hold the images, the references to the images, as I work with them. My biggest leap when I started working in JavaScript was figuring out the scope of variables. And if you remember, you have to declare variables you're going to use throughout your entire program as global variables. And the way you do that is you declare them outside of any functions. If you declare them inside a function, they're only good locally inside that function. So I'm going to go before I load my window, and I'm going to create a variable, myDog. If I didn't do that, we'd have all sorts of issues down the road dealing with the scope of myDog. So now let's go in and define init all. Usually you put your functions at the beginning before you use them. JavaScript will find them pretty much anywhere. So let's define our functions, and we want a function init all, and there we go. Let's leave some room for some code. And the one thing we want to do is test this now that we have this function defined. So let's go to preview in Firefox 5. Here we go. Down here in the console.log, we see that it started, it linked, everybody's happy. So we can go back and put some code in our init all function. First thing we want to do is we want to go and grab the image we want to work on, and let's just work on the first one. Let's use it as a simple example. We'll refine it a little bit on our next iteration, but let's just say myDog, because we've defined myDog, we don't have to declare it. So we'll say equals document.images, square brackets, quotes, lucky, unquote. So what in essence is an event listener. We're going to listen for events to happen. We're going to listen for and watch for the mouse in this case. And we'll, again, it's hard to know what to say first, because until you have several of the pieces together, a lot of this doesn't make as much sense as it will after you hear everything. So these are event listeners. They're basically just saying myDog, and then on mouse over is an event. We're going to assign this event for myDog a function called lucky over. And let me explain a little bit. My dog is an object. Mouse over is an event. We're saying when on mouse over happens on my dog, we're going to assign a function called lucky over. And over refers to mouse over, and hopefully that kind of makes sense. We'll do something similar on mouse out. And if you can see a pattern here, except that it's kind of standard to say up. In some instances, it's also shorter to type in out, not by much, but you could say lucky out or lucky up. I just chose up in this instance when your mouse is up, basically, when nothing is going on. And we want a mydog.click, oops, on click, and we want to go to a whole other web page, so our function, we'll name it go lucky. So we have on mouse over a function, a sign called lucky over, on mouse out one called lucky up, and on click we're going to just use a function called go lucky. The only thing wrong here is that this will cause errors in Firefox or any browser right now because we haven't defined our functions. So we have to define these functions, lucky over, lucky up, and go lucky. So let's do that. Let's create our event. This isn't a listener so much as a handler, so I'm going to say event handler is a comment. These are event handlers. We listen for the event in the init_all function, and now we're going to handle them. We're going to give them something to do once they occur. So we'll say function is a keyword because we're creating a function. We'll say lucky over, open and close parentheses, open and close curly braces, and inside of those we'll say mydog.source. And write to it, we can read, and we'll say the source equals, and in quotes, give myself some room there for the rest of these. Inside the quotes, I'm going to say, inside the images folder, you'll find a lucky over.jpg. And that's pretty cool. So when you have a mouse over, we're going to change the source for my dog to lucky over. I don't need all this room because we're not doing anything that complicated right now. So let's define the next one. Function lucky up, open and close parentheses, open and close curly braces, give myself a little room to work. We're going to say mydog.source equals, and let's see here, in the images folder we have a lucky up.jpg. Naming your files is going to become a key aspect of the solutions you come up to programming problems. So you want to think about being consistent with your naming and some sort of scheme that makes sense to you that you can semantically communicate to others. I'm using over and up on all my images, and that's just the way I did it. Everybody does it slightly differently. There's no right or wrong, as long as you're consistent and can communicate your choices to others. So right now the only thing left is making a function called go lucky, open and close parentheses, open and close curly braces, and we want to, this is something new, it's called window.location. Location is obviously a property of the object window. We want to set it to, in quotes, don't forget your semicolon at the end, lucky.html. I have a document, if you look over here on the right hand side of Dreamweaver, I have a document called lucky.html. And if you look in the source code, next time we visit the source code, you'll see that there's just a placeholder there. We're telling JavaScript what file to link to connect to this link. I'll show you that in just a second. But window.location equals lucky.html. Location is a property of window. Now, if JavaScript is capturing this click, and we're here on line 8, we're capturing that click, we want to return false to HTML so the HTML doesn't do anything in case the HTML is set to degrade gracefully in case somebody has JavaScript turned off. We want to return false when JavaScript is active so that the HTML doesn't do anything. Returning false will deactivate whatever the HTML is pointing to, and it'll use just this JavaScript. So this is good. We need to test this, see what's going on. So let me go in and preview this in Firefox. There we go. If I roll over Lucky's picture, it goes from black and white to color. Awesome. If I click on it, it goes to the detail page. It's very, very cool. That's all there is to a simple rollover. As I go back to the code, I'll point a couple of things out. If you look at the source code, again, on all these images, say for Lucky, the href, the file it's going to link to, is just a placeholder. That # means is universally thought of as a placeholder. It doesn't go anywhere. And we, with JavaScript, overwrote the link for that anchor tag. So this is very, very cool, and it works. And we'll take something a little bit more complicated in a moment for all the images.